Luke chapter 11, verse 14. We had talked about, of course, the disciples' prayer and its significance. We had talked about the persistence of continuing to pray, about asking, seeking, and knocking. And that's the background, the context of what we've just been doing in chapter 11. Now we move down to verse 14. And it says, and he was casting out a demon, and it was mute. So it was when the demon had gone out that the mute spoke, and the multitudes marveled. All right, there's, as is usually the case, Jesus does something, and the people marvel, the people are amazed, but there's always some who are looking for something to accuse Jesus of. And Jesus had to deal with that on almost a daily basis. You know, the Bible says he went about doing good. I think the lesson is, even when you're always doing good, there's somebody or a group of people that are not going to like it. They're going to find something wrong with it, or they're going to twist it, which is exactly what's going to happen here. They're going to twist it completely around. And that's, of course, what some of the Pharisees would do quite often. Some of the scribes would do quite often. And that's what happens here. Now, something similar to this had happened before, back in Matthew chapter 12. But that's an entirely different experience. Back in Matthew chapter 12, that was way up in Galilee. Now, remember, he's getting close to Jerusalem. So it's kind of a similar experience, similar event, but different people, different location. And this happened to Jesus, of course, many times before. So, separate events, but again, it's about the same thing. So he had, this man had a demon, and the word here for mute in the original language means to cut. And that's what would a lot of times would happen when one army would defeat another army. What happened quite often is the slaves or the prisoners of war would have part of their tongue cut so they couldn't talk. And so therefore, you know, the cutting of the tongue then became to mean that someone couldn't talk. They were mute. And that's what this demon had caused the man to do, to be mute where he couldn't talk. And so the people were just amazed because Jesus was able to cast the demon out, and then this guy that hadn't been able to talk instantly was able to talk. Honest people, when they saw Jesus' miracles, realized what they were, miracles. But it was other groups of people that were always trying to find, again, something to accuse Jesus of. And they were quite good at it. And in this section, it's one of the best places in the Bible where Jesus uses logic and reason to defeat his enemies. It's really an amazing lesson in how to defeat error with truth. And we'll look at like 2 or 3 different ways that Jesus uses logic and reason to destroy these people's arguments. And it's priceless. It really is just absolutely priceless. Because he was the master of it. You know, I mean, no one could ever do it better than he did. So, but some of them said, verse 15, he cast out demons by Beelzebub, the ruler of the demons. So this is the first thing they claimed. Well, Jesus was casting out demons, but he was doing it by the ruler of the demons, the prince of demons, who, of course, to them was Satan. Yes. Oh, I thought you were saying something. All right. Don't scratch your face again, please. It threw me off. So Jesus and others testing him saw from him a sign from heaven. So there's kind of 2 different groups trying to do 2 different things here. One was saying, oh, well, he's casting him out by Satan. The others are testing him because they're wanting a sign. All right? Now, here Jesus comes back with his logical rebuttal of what they're saying. Well, he says, knowing their thoughts, see, he was, again, able to know exactly why they were saying the things they were. He comes back and says, every kingdom divided against itself is brought to desolation, and a house divided against a house falls. All right, here's his first way of destroying what they're saying. Because what they were saying was illogical and unreasonable. All right? And people still do this in the religious world today. I mean, they will use something, they will try and go to the scriptures, and what they come up with is completely illogical, makes no sense whatsoever. And often that's because they'll take some verse or even part of a verse completely out of context, and it teaches exactly the opposite of what God's trying to convey. So these people, Jesus says that every kingdom, regardless of what kind of kingdom, and not necessarily just a spiritual kingdom, but a physical kingdom, divided against itself is brought to desolation. If you've got a kingdom and it's divided and it's being divided into divisions, what's going to happen to it? It's going to fall. It's going to fall. It's not going to stand if it's going to be divided. We see this historically with all kinds of empires. Roman Empire, for instance, at the beginning, of course, was really strong, but after a while, what happened? There was all these different little divisions and people trying to rule over this area and that area and that area, and of course, over time, it ended up falling. Because any type of kingdom cannot stand if it's being divided. Eventually, it's going to fall down. So Jesus comes back and says, it's totally irrational, all right? It's irrational to think that if I'm casting out demons by Satan, that I'm destroying Satan's empire. Why would Satan want to do that? The demons belong to Satan, and everybody agreed with that. So Jesus says, why in the world, and how could you say that I'm casting demons out? Because if I'm casting demons out by Satan, I'm destroying Satan's empire. Why would Satan want his empire destroyed? He says that's totally unreasonable. Satan would never cast out his own people. Satan wants demons in those people. Satan wanted demons in as many people as possible. So Satan's not going to cast demons out. That's what you're claiming I'm doing. Satan's not going to do that. That makes no sense whatsoever. And so Jesus is trying to get them to see that it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. He says a house divided against a house falls. So we have Satan, and he's casting out demons. That house is divided. It's going to fall. Says that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So if Satan also is divided against himself, how will his kingdom stand? Because you say, I cast out demons by Beelzebub. See, he's trying to force them to understand that what they're saying doesn't make any sense. It's unreasonable. Don't you understand that if Satan keeps dividing his kingdom, over time it's going to fall apart? So he says saying that Satan is casting out demons is ridiculous. Says it's ridiculous. Couldn't possibly be true. So he goes on and says, and if I cast out demons by Beelzebub, by whom do your sons cast them out? Therefore they will be your judges. Now, remember, it wasn't too long ago that Jesus had sent out, 70 or 72 of his followers, and what was one of the things they were amazed about? What could they do? Power over the demons, didn't they? They have power over the demons. Remember, they come back after they'd went into different towns and so forth, houses, and they came back and they were amazed. We have power over the demons. And what did Jesus say in response to that? What did he say I saw? Satan fall like lightning. And we'll talk more about Satan's influence shortly, but And all the people that were followers of Jesus at this time were Jews, right? I mean, they came from Jewish backgrounds. So these people from Jewish backgrounds were able to cast out demons. He says, are they casting demons out also by Beelzebub? By Satan, ruler of the demons? They doing the same thing? So, if we go back to chapter 9, I believe it was. Yeah, chapter 9, he had sent out the 12, and they were able to do that as well. Chapter 10 is when the 70 came back, and they were able to, cast out demons, and the spirits were subject to them. Jesus says, I saw Satan fall like lightning. So all of these were able to cast out these demons. And again, Jesus is trying to show this argument that what they're saying is completely faulty. You hear, and I've heard that, you can't use reasoning and logic in the Bible. Jesus did all the time. That's how Jesus brought down so much faulty teaching and ideas and principles, was by showing them that it wasn't possible. It was unreasonable. It was illogical. And that's what he's doing here. This is his rebuttal, if you will, of what he was trying to get them to understand. So when he says, they will be your judges, he says, what you're judging is going to come back and judge you. You're accusing me of casting out demons, but you're going to be judged because you're claiming I'm casting out demons by Satan. He says, I'm not doing that at all. So Jesus, again, he's trying to demonstrate to them that it's impossible, totally unreasonable, for me to be casting out demons. He says that makes no sense whatsoever. So he goes on, but if I cast out demons with the finger of God, surely the kingdom of God has come upon you. All right? Now he's still using logic. The finger of God has been used throughout the Bible. Remember, it was used all the way back in Egypt when the Israelites were brought out of Egyptian bondage. The finger of God helped bring them out. Mount Sinai, when the Ten Commandments were given, the finger of God was used to write the Ten Commandments. So that's a way of describing God's power, what He's able to do. So if I cast out demons with the power of God, with God's authority behind me, He says, surely the kingdom of God has come upon you. He says it is on you right now because you're making claims that I'm doing something against God, whereas it's just the opposite. I have the power of God with me, what he calls the finger of God. So he has another way of showing that they're unreasonable. When a strong man, fully armed, guards his own palace, his goods are in peace. But when a stronger than he comes upon him and overcomes him, he takes from him all his armor in which he trusted and divides his spoils. He says, this happens in physical life. He says, as long as this person is the strongest one, nobody can take it away from him. But what happens when someone stronger comes? When someone stronger comes, he wins, takes his spoils, overcomes him, divides everything he has. And again, he's trying to show that I'm stronger than Satan. We have this man that has a demon. He's under control of Satan. Jesus says, I've come along and I've taken this demon out. Jesus says, I'm showing you that I'm stronger than Satan. I'm stronger than Satan. That's what he's trying to get them to understand. I'm not casting them out by Satan. I'm showing you that I'm stronger than Satan. I'm the stronger man. Satan, yeah, he's strong. Compared to Jesus, not even close. And Jesus says, I'm overcome him. I'm going to take from him his armor, his spoils, and so forth. So he says, I'm the master of Satan. Satan can't master me. Satan can't destroy me. Satan can't overcome me. Jesus says, essentially, I'm binding Satan. That was, going back again to Luke chapter 10 when he saw that, when he says, I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. His power and influence over people was being bound. And of course that term is used throughout the New Testament to refer to this binding of Satan. Let's go to 1 John chapter 3. And we'll just look at a few of these that has to do with Satan and Christ. 1 John 3, would someone read verse 8?
He who sins is of the devil, for the devil has sinned from the beginning. For this purpose the Son of God was manifested, that he might destroy the works of the devil.
Destroy the works of the devil. That's why Jesus was revealed. A purpose was destroy the works of the devil. How about Colossians 2:15? Colossians chapter 2, verse 15. Someone would read verse 15 of Colossians chapter 2. This is referring to what Christ did by his death on the cross.
And having spoiled principalities and powers, he made a show of them openly, triumphing over them in it.
Triumphing over them. And of course the context, if you go back to the verse before, is about the cross. Is about the cross. So Jesus was able to disarm, triumph, spoil principalities and powers, and these are ones under the control of Satan. He was able to triumph over them. He made a public spectacle of them. Let's see if there's any others here. Let's go to John chapter 12. John chapter 12. And there's lots of these, but just maybe one or two more. John chapter 12. Let's see. First of all, John chapter 12, verse 31. Someone would read that for us.
Now judgment is upon this world. Now the ruler of this world will be cast out.
The ruler of this world will be cast out. Again, talking about Satan. Going to be cast out. Still staying in John, go over to chapter 16. This time, let's see. Yes, verse 11 now. John 16, verse 11.
And in regard to judgment, because the prince of this world now stands condemned.
Now stands condemned. See, when Jesus rose from the dead, Satan knew it was done. Satan knew that he had no possible chance of defeating Christ. You might say that was the final straw. And there is no way that Satan can ever overcome Christ. Christ triumphed over Satan when he rose from the dead. And of course, Jesus knew that was going to happen. And so from that time, there's no hope for Satan. What Satan is doing now, until the end of time, when the Bible says that him and his angels are cast into the lake of fire, what he's doing is he's trying to get as much company as possible. He's trying to get as much company as possible to be with him in Gehenna, everlasting hell. That's what he's doing. And he uses every means to do that. He transforms himself into what appears to be good. So do his workers, angels of light, to try and deceive people. The Bible talks, Revelation 20, about the binding of Satan. I think it's verse 6. So Jesus repeatedly talks about how Satan's power and influence has been reduced. All right? Like Satan falling from heaven. So he says, verse 23, he who is not with me is against me, and he who does not gather with me scatters. And again, this is another point where Jesus is trying to show, using logic and reason. Jesus says there's absolutely only two sides. There's not a middle ground. There's not a third path. I mean, think about how many times in the New Testament the Bible repeatedly talks about being two ways or two paths or two groups. I mean, over and over and over again. People are either saved or lost. They're either sheep or goats. They're either on the narrow way or the wide way. Over and over again. Sons of light, sons of darkness. There's not sons of gray. It is one or the other. And that's what Jesus is teaching in verse 23. If you're not with me, if you're not following me, if you don't believe in me and follow me, then you're automatically put in the other group. There's not some intermediate group that you go to. He says you're automatically in the other group. He says there's two armies. If you don't join my army, you're drafted into the other one. You have no choice. And that's what he says. He who does not gather with me scatters. If you're not with me, if you're not on the side of good, if you're not on the side of right, then you're automatically with Satan doing evil. You're scattering. You're doing what you can to not do what's good and right. It says you're scattering. So, two sides. There's God's side and Satan's side, period. There is no neutrality here. No neutral ground, period. So it's about choices. Jesus made that clear, in Matthew 25, where he talks about halfway through that chapter about when the Son of Man comes to judge the world. What's he going to do? He's going to divide everybody into two groups. Sheep on the right, goats on the left. And that's it. There aren't any others. That's the sum total of all the choices. One or the other. If you choose not to be on the side of the sheep, you're automatically a goat. There's not a half sheep, half goat. There's nothing in between. So it is Jesus trying to understand that, or trying to show these people that I'm casting out demons because I'm on God's side. And if you're accusing me of casting them out by Satan, that means you're on Satan's side. See, the two sides. So to these Jewish people that he's talking to, he says, by what you're saying, you're telling me you've chosen Satan. You've chosen Satan's side. You're not with me, so you're against me, so you're scattering. You're not on God's side anymore. You're on Satan's side. So it's a very severe warning to these people, and he makes this. He kind of elaborates on this in the next 3 verses, and that's probably as far as we'll get. When an unclean spirit goes out of a man, he goes through dry places seeking rest and finding none. He says, I'll return to my house from which I came. And when he comes, he finds it swept and put in order. Then he goes and takes with him 7 other spirits more wicked than himself, and they enter and dwell there, and the last state of that man is worse than the first. And you can apply that to an individual, or you can apply that to the Jewish nation in the first century. That's what the Jewish nation, remember when they went into exile, Babylonian exile, why did they go? Because God wanted to rid them of idolatry. That was their primary sin, was idolatry. So they were sent into Babylonian captivity for those 70 years to root out idolatry. And it worked. It worked really well. That demon was exorcised out of them. The problem was, during that time, between then and the time that Jesus came and Jesus walked with them, they didn't put anything in their house. They left it swept and in order. They should have spent that time preparing for the Messiah, because the law, Moses, and the prophets had said the Messiah was coming, and they knew where he was going to be born, and they knew what he was going to do, so they should have been prepared. And instead of doing that, their house was empty, and so they ended up being in much worse condition. And so the vast number of the Jewish people in the first century rejected Jesus. And by rejecting Jesus, they automatically accepted Satan. So the Jewish people in the first century who chose not to believe in Jesus as the Messiah automatically was on Satan's side. Automatically was on Satan's side. And of course that can apply to an individual as well. And so there's some tremendous warnings there about how people need to fill their lives. Because since there's only two choices, and there's not 3, 4, or 5, then you have to choose by what you do whether you're going to follow God, whether you're going to follow Christ, or you're going to follow Satan. And so many people think they're following Christ when in reality they're not. They're actually scattering. They're actually scattering because they're not really His disciple. And that's one of the saddest parts of it. Yes?
It almost seems like it could be talking about today's Christians too.
Oh, well, sure. Oh, absolutely.
They leave evil but then
absolutely.
fall away.
Yeah. They don't fill themselves up, right, on the individual basis. That's right. And if you don't fill yourself, if you don't grow, if you don't take the meat and get stronger, yeah, you're going to almost always fall away. You are. So that's why I said you can apply it on an individual basis or as that nation. They both fit in. It's a warning about you have to choose. You have to choose. You have to make conscious decisions to do right. Because if you don't make conscious decisions to do right, you're going to end up doing wrong. Again, no neutrality. No middle ground. You're choosing the right way, you're choosing the left way, regardless. Yes?
Repeating at the end of that the second
yes.
position
is far, far worse. And it was for the Jewish nation. Look at what happened to them. Jesus, remember when he came into Jerusalem, looked down upon Jerusalem and he started to weep because he knew what was going to happen. He knew what was going to happen because they had rejected him. And that same thing happens with people today when they reject Jesus. The same thing. So it's a warning about making correct choices. Because if you don't, again, make the right choice, you're automatically making the wrong choice. And there's no such thing as making no choices. That's what we hear a lot. Well, I'm not going to make any choices. That's not possible. Because if you don't choose right, you've automatically chosen wrong. That's what he wants them to understand. And it is again, this whole section is an incredible example of using, logic and reason to defeat error. And that's exactly what he did. Well, our time is up, and I appreciate everybody's help and comments, and Lord willing, we will start there in verse 27 next week.